All right, we're recording. Good morning. I am Jessica Waite, the president of Very Good Food. On our podcast, Growing a Food Movement, this is a forum for discussion about building a more resilient local food system. The COVID pandemic has emphasized the need for this resilience and has challenged many of us with the opportunity to create new systems and strategies. We have also seen an outpouring of support for our local businesses and our local heroes. This podcast Zoom series, The Bright Side, will highlight stories of growth and innovation as we discuss how we use these lessons to create momentum toward a healthier future. And today, I would like to introduce one of our local food heroes and frontline heroes. We have Dr. Sabrina Falquier. Thank you so much for being here.
Such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Of course. Dr. Sabrina is a physician, a culinary medicine expert, and the founder of Sensation Salud, LLC. And like so many that I've had the opportunity and honor to speak with, you have this incredible resume. And I would just love to dig a little bit more into what that really means and what you do.
So good question. A lot of people wonder what culinary medicine is. And first of all, I just want to say I'm so honored. I know, Jessica, you and I, our paths started crossing a few years ago, and I love how there's been kind of adding to our relationship and the ways that we know each other. So I love to have this opportunity for us to talk today. So I have been, I'm traditional allopathic medicine trained, and I've been working for 15 years as a primary care doctor with Sharp Steele Medical Group. And in the last 4 years, I've started incorporating much more culinary medicine into my practice. And that is a new area of specialty that's really kind of a combination of two things. It's essentially taking nutritional information, so the science of nutrition, and then the art of culinary arts. So essentially helping people understand the health consequences of food choices, so the positives or the negatives, and realizing how that affects their health even within a few hours or a few minutes of when they eat, and then into long term, so months, decades of the health consequences that it can have. And then taking that information, so that's the why of why eating certain ways can help your body, and then the how, so really going into the kitchen and teaching people. A lot of people have lost the ability to know, how do you hold a knife? How do you have that awkwardness in the kitchen? And really teaching them how in simple ways they can really create food that really nurtures their health.
That's incredible. I feel like we all have this vague sense that we should eat healthier, we should do this or that, but really understand why that benefits us, and then how to do it is so important. I mean, we see these beautiful vegetables that are grown locally, and we say, what do we do with them? I get calls like that all the time. Like, what is this? What do I cook with this? So then, as far as what is this Sensation Salud? I'm very curious about that. Is that your...
So that's my baby. So that's
your baby. Good.
Yeah. So I should say that's my third child. I have two children who just turned 12 and 14, live children. And then this is essentially over, I'm going to back up a little bit. So essentially my culinary medicine. So I've loved to cook for years. And my husband always jokes that the happiest he's ever seen me was I took 6 weeks off between my training. So I did internal medicine, and then I added a women's health fellowship to really round out my primary care, kind of general health care. And then I had 6 weeks before I started my job. And he would come home from work, and I had gone to the farmer's market, cooked 5 or 6 soups, and I'm having him taste each one of them. And you could just see this lightness of me that just brightened and was so excited. And I wanted him to tell me the nuances of each of the soups I'd cooked. And then things kind of went, in the back burner. I started my career, I had children, and I still enjoyed good food, and would mainly get that through restaurants. And part of it was when my kids were young, I wanted them to have those sensory memories of that smell of your mom's pizza sauce or pasta sauce, or those memories that are just so linked to our childhood. And I went to a conference in 2016 it's called Healthy Kitchens, Healthy Lives. And it's a collaboration between the Culinary Institute of America and the Harvard School of Public Health. And when the keynote speaker started talking, I literally started crying. I mean, and that's not something that happens at medical conferences very often, as you can imagine. And it really was this awakening. I'd gone for personal reasons. I had, we have to do medical education hours every year here, and this just sounded really interesting. And as soon as he started speaking, I knew my life was about to take this giant swerve. And throughout the 4 days of the conference, all these ideas started coming up, and how to incorporate it, and what does San Diego have to offer. And that was the beginning of a giant change for me. So Sensation Salute has been my I used to call it my alter ego, but I realize it's not alter anymore. It is who I am deep inside, to really be able to show, again, that why and that how to different populations. And what's so interesting about culinary medicine is that when I think of kind of the end user, or who benefits from this, is anywhere from physicians, so people in the medical community, teaching them how to have that conversation with patients around food, to people, I do a lot of work with Olivewood Gardens and Learning Center in National Cities. We have that population, to people who attend, like your Very Good Food, and I've done an event with you guys of, there's so many different interest levels. And what's really amazing is the questions that stem from those events are so similar. So it really doesn't matter what the demographic is. You realize we're all searching for the same information.
That's incredible. And I think making that information available to all different demographics in an arena where maybe it could have been seen as just kind of a privileged thing to have this opportunity to know this about food and our food system. And that education component is so key to really make it accessible to all. So is this something that is, I mean, I know the answer to this question, I think, but is this normal in your industry, in your field, you know, as a physician, or is this something that you kind of went out and did something a little different? Did you get any kickback from other doctors? You know, I'm just curious about how that looks.
So thank you, Jessica. I love this thought, because it's funny when, and I'm sure you've had this experience too, when you've gone down this road, and 4 years in a lot of ways, I think later in my life will feel like a blink in time, but so much has happened in those 4 years. And when I think of the audience I feel like the hardest audience has been my peers. There's this sense of, I've gone to school and I know everything there is to know. And it's hard to get people to be open to, I almost want to say new ideas, but it's really going back to,
it's such an old idea. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Older than time, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's been so interesting, and it's been a lot of personal growth for me too, to gain my confidence and realize I can walk into meetings that I never thought I'd be a part of. So board meetings with Sharpry Steely and our president, and really knowing that there's the scientific evidence behind why asking patients, what are you eating? And then helping guide them to not take away their flavors that they like, but how to help them make that first step to be able to transition. And I always feel like I have to make this caveat, and your restaurants are the perfect epitome of this, is that I love delicious food. And when I talk about adding health to it, it doesn't mean bland boiled broccoli. It means really highlighting, for a lot of people, there's certain flavors they grew up with. So again, here in San Diego, a lot of people love Mexican food. And so it's like, okay, what is the essence of Mexican food that we love? A lot of times it's the spices and the herbs that are used. So then teaching people, okay, you can have that deliciousness of those tacos. And how about we make a veggie hash that has the cumin and the paprika and all those spices that make the Mexican food what we love? Doesn't have to be the fat-laden foods that we often can get outside. So learning how to do that easily, then people feel so much better. You're not taking away their flavors that they love, the comforts that they love, but teaching them that you can have it, and you can transition in this way, and now you're improving your health with that meal, rather than feeling guilty that you had this meal on the side. So I realize I totally deviated from your original question.
No, I love it. And you're making me hungry. I'm not going to lie. The veggie hash, I'm like, where is this hash? I love it. No, but I think what you really kind of just demonstrated is, even if it's, I'm not going to say hostile, but an arena of people who maybe don't believe what you believe yet, when you have as much passion as you have, it's just overflowing. And you have the data and the research behind it, plus the passion and the know-how and, the why and the how. I think it's incredible, because you just convinced probably anyone who's listening that it's not that hard, and it can make sense. So it's just, I think you did answer the question very, very, what's the word?
The roundabout.
Yeah, the roundabout, but then also in a very colorful way that was really fun to listen to. So thank you. Made me hungry.
Anytime.
Yeah, God, we love food. That's all we talk about, I feel like. But it's so awesome that food can be the thing that heals us. And like we said, it's the older
Mhm.
than time approach. This is not a new approach. This is just going back to something that worked really well for a very long time, which is nourishing our bodies with the beautiful produce that's around us, especially, in San Diego. Um, so then you've got this incredible path, and you've got your baby that you're working on, and your other two babies, but your sensation salute, and your passion and everything that you are working to advocate for. And then come winter time last January and February, what were you really focused on? Like what was your path forward?
Oh, this is always such a tough one to say out loud. So, as I talked about being in these meetings, and it took almost 2 years to finally get our medical group. That's about 500 or 600 physicians, and then the board and kind of the decision makers. We had just launched our shared medical appointments, where we were actually gathering 12 patients in a room, gathering for 2 hours, having really in-depth conversations about all the pieces, the components of what does fruits and vegetables look like? How can you prepare them? Whole grains, well thought out proteins, cooking with them, doing cooking demos with them. And then we were just launching. I just done my two events with them. And then we're going to look at health outcomes. Do diabetic numbers improve if people utilize this knowledge? So it was like the accumulation of 2 years of work had just started. And of course that has been completely halted. So that
Yeah.
was a tough blow. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it hurts. It's like there's things that were happening right at that time that we were all really excited about and had a lot of
Mm-hmm.
momentum. And then there was just this screeching halt. And
Mm-hmm.
I felt it in the restaurant industry for sure. But what did that look like in your profession? Was there a mobilization? Was it just a pause? Like, what did that look like for you in your own career?
Mm-hmm. So as far as the culinary medicine and the shared medical appointment is just at
Hmm.
a long-term hold. Like there's no
Yeah.
conversations about when that might start up again. And I feel like um, for my sanity purposes, it just has to just be on the back burner and just realize, okay,
Hmm.
if it's meant to come back, it'll come back. And if it doesn't come back how it looked before, maybe it'll look different, but just
Hmm.
to let that go for a bit. And as far as general medical practice, it was really interesting because there was a lot of, I mean, none of us have ever been in a pandemic before, and how to care for all populations. Again, people who have symptoms of COVID, people who need their routine care. And what we initially saw, so we essentially canceled all in-person appointments and started doing telephone and video visits. And that was
Hmm.
something that our group had already done a little bit of, but this really opened that up to utilizing it more. And initially, most of the appointments that we were seeing were actually related to anxiety
Hmm.
around all these dreams and halt that had taken place. And for different people, that looked different, right? So people had lost their jobs. People were so petrified of if they put a toe outside of their house that they were going to get COVID. And that was a change. I mean, in primary care, I see kind of the full gamut, and some people don't quite know what internal medicine is. It's essentially like a pediatrician for adults, so it's kind of like your catch-all doctor. And essentially it went from having a lot of variety to our days, from sprained ankle to diabetic follow-up, and all of a sudden it was all anxiety related. And that of course changes the flow of how I'm mentally going through the day. And within 2 weeks, I would say, of when this started, our group also did a fantastic job of shifting gears and helping us feel safe as providers coming into work. So essentially, anyone with any symptoms, potential of COVID, went to these tents that were set up and are still set up, and allowing us in this space separate to be able to give the care that people needed, but to feel safe in our work environment. So. And
Yeah.
things have continued to shift. Now we're trying to remind people that our chronic care needs are really important, because I think everybody said, okay, if I'm not losing a limb, I'm going to step away and not go into the doctor's office, and to remind people that we need to keep up with our care, especially diabetics. And diabetics always come to the top of my head, because a lot of people have shifted how they eat, what they're reaching for. And we're seeing people's diabetic numbers worsening. And so we're really trying to remind people and help reel them in, and bring them back to the medical community. So,
Yeah.
and that another piece of that, and one of the things that I've kind of shifted, but it was more of a continue to focus. So when you have, again, with the pandemic, the sense of we have no control over this virus, this nebulous virus that affects people, different demographics in unexpected ways, is to really remind us of what are the parts that we do have a say in. And this is where those conversations with the heightened anxiety really came in, of focusing on these 5 pillars of wellness. So one of them is food, which of course we're focusing on a lot today. Before I go into the 5, really realizing what are the things, if I was to get the virus, what are the parts that help me combat the virus in as easy a way, so get through it. Some people might not even know they had it, is to really optimize our immune system. So those 5 things are food, sleep. So trying to get, even though a lot of us don't have our regular schedule like we do, but really trying to go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time. So really honor that sleep time. And with that is being careful. So if right before bed, I watch the news or get on an hour of social media and web myself into this anxious state, it's going to be hard to get a restful sleep. So to honor sleep and the hour before it, of setting ourselves up for kind of the best sleep possible. The third one is physical activity. So a minimum of getting outside and 30 minutes of walking with our mask on, and trying to walk in an area with low density number of people. Third one is connecting. So remembering that connection may look different. So we may not be able to go to our favorite restaurants and have that time with our loved ones, but to remember the importance of connection through phone calls. I've actually started writing letters, and I love writing old school letter and knowing when I put it in the booth that a few days later, someone's going to get this little gift
I know.
of
I love
connection.
that.
Yeah. And then the last one is mindfulness, which kind of goes along with that same thing of really making sure that we are taking time on our day that's just for us. So for some people, it could look like meditation. For other people, it could be like dancing like no one's watching, or gardening, or something where you're connecting and remembering that we are part of something much bigger. And that's one of the reasons I love encouraging people to get outside. And even if you don't have the physical abilities to go on a walk, at least sit in a chair and notice, hey, that flower grew. Or if you have a small garden, notice, oh, wow, that plant's flowering. Or, hey, that's my first passion flower, or my first passion fruit. And it's just a reminder that we are part of something bigger.
That's awesome. That I feel like I just gravitated toward my garden throughout this entire period. And it's just been, we have a big garden behind the plot, and I walk back there and I just sit and watch all the little life and, pick things and eat them. And just that connected feel is just so good. So I love that that's one of the focus areas. Now, I feel like I have like 20 questions for you, and I know we've got somewhat not limited time, but trying to keep these in a certain time frame. I just get excited because there's just so many different angles. One thing I was curious about, you were talking about this emphasis on food, and you're one of the very few people I've heard about or talking about like the immunity side of things, because I feel like there was this kind of mad rush to plasticize and sterilize everything when this started happening. But the emphasis on immunity was, from what I heard, a little bit less. And so how was that, integrating that into your messaging, was that something people were really receptive to? The idea that if we do build healthy immune systems, we're going to be less likely to be, maybe hit as hard or hit with the virus at all. Is that something that was very prominent in the healthcare circles?
Mm-hmm. Well, I wouldn't say, I'm not sure about the full circles, but I can say for us that do focus on, there's been a bigger emphasis on talking about these 5 pillars, which is really about self-empowerment, about your health in general, and always, but especially during the pandemic, of really, I think one of the things when the pandemic came around is this sense of hopelessness, of despair, of I have no control over what's around me. And to bring it back and have people realize that every time they're having a meal, a snack, they can choose foods that actually can help them combat this very nebulous virus that's out there. And so I do feel like in some ways people have been able, there's been so much going on, but I feel like in a lot of ways it's taken away so much static that we have around us, because we busy ourselves so much with activities and meetings and otherwise. And so much of that outside of our control was distilled down. And now you have all these hours where you are thinking about, where am I going to get my food? And what is that food going to look like? And to learn that, yes, the packaged plasticated processed food may be quicker to get and it may feel more sterile. But when you come back down to, if I eat those vegetables and fruits, and then think about where I'm getting them. So if I'm getting them at the farmer's market or I grow it in my garden, there's less hands that have touched it, because I think that's the part that petrified people so much, is how many people have touched that peach to see if it's the right one to grab.
Yeah.
And to realize, okay, if I go to the farmer's market, already the number of transitions that food has made is much less, and making it much safer, if you want to put it that way, and realize the nutrients that I'm getting from that peach or that vegetable, that green, is so much greater than if I get a packaged X, Y, or Z.
Absolutely. And I'm just excited. And that's so empowering, the way that you put that, and empowering that you empower people to think this way and to eat this way. And then, we talked a little bit before we started recording about kind of inequity in our food system and this idea of food justice. And I feel like this kind of became something that was even more prevalent in our minds throughout this pandemic, because this idea of access, and we talk a lot about having fair and equal access to healthy foods, and then also fair and equal access to the healthcare that we all need in order to thrive and survive through something like this. So I know that your work with Olivewood probably brings you into kind of a more broad socioeconomic kind of area or arena, but from your doctor hat and then also your food medicine advocate hat, what have you seen as far as has there been a fair and just kind of allocation of resources, food, empowerment about healthy food choices, and then also healthcare throughout our society? Is that a question that makes sense? It was a hard one to wrap my head around. Okay.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So as when you talk about your question, I think one of the parts that seems so wrong is, of course, so many people lost their job. And in our country, our job is tied to health insurance, right? So now you have this double whammy of, you no longer have the financial resources that you rely on for your day-to-day, month-to-month bills. And now you've lost access to healthcare. So now you're in this situation where you don't have the money to maybe choose to get that vegetable or that fruit. And now your diabetes might be getting worse. So that's the part that's just has people just handcuffed. I mean, in so many awful ways. And at the same time, so that's kind of the negative, but the positive I see is, what I love is places like Olivewood, who essentially, as soon as it was clear that this is long-term, they essentially took out all their flowers that they had set up for their big yearly fundraiser, sold them for Mother's Day, so bring some funds in, and then transition those pieces of land, those acres, into edible food. And every Thursday they give out food. They've worked with local grocers to bring in dry goods to add to that. And then places like Kitchens for Good and the food bank, they have tripled, quadrupled. I mean, it's amazing how much not only the need has increased, but those areas of resources have turned around and not allowed, but essentially have created ways to make more meals available to just a huge number of people, way bigger than it was before. And it just highlights the amount of need that's out there. And it just fills me in a great way to see that people for fundraisers have just open their wallets, people who have been able to give in a way that they can, to allow people who can't afford food right now, who don't have the access to it. So the biggest thing I think is, if there's a take home, depending who's listening, is saying there are food sources available, and sometimes it may look different of how you seek that out. And then also, if you are somebody who does want to help in ways, to realize that donating to different places really makes a difference, because there are people who are working on getting the food to the people that need it, and having funds flowing through, having food that flows through that makes a huge difference, and ability for more people to get the resources that they need.
That's so empowering. And I already had the opportunity to speak to Aviva from Kitchens for Good, and then talking to a lot of local farmers about how much more they're producing, and groups like Oceanside Kitchen Collaborative too, that have just been doing thousands and thousands of meals. And I think, we talk about the bright side, which is kind of where we're going now, but, just looking at this idea that people are good, they come together and they support their communities. And that's so inspiring to hear, just you talk about what Olive would do. I heard that from someone else too, that they got rid of all their lavender and grew, and this was down in Baja, and grew plants so that they could feed their community. And that is just awesome. That's community resilience. It's so exciting. So then I guess, I feel like a lot of your responses have kind of supported this idea that there's a lot of positive coming from this entire experience. Is there any kind of one focal point that you would say this is something that really was good that came from this kind of really catastrophic or overwhelming time? Do you have something that you would say this is the take home point or the silver lining?
Yeah. So it's funny because there's so many different thoughts and ideas that are kind of swirling, so to speak. But I think I almost think of personal experience that I know has been experienced for many people, is that sense of community, that sense of coming together. And it's such a time when we can feel so isolated, yet to realize who and how many people are really there to help each other. And I can tell you from a personal standpoint, in my neighborhood, my husband's a physician too, and our life has really looked very different from a emotional standpoint of that feeling of going to work and kind of feeling like we have to decontaminate ourselves when we come home before being able to hug our kids, from something that simple and that the reality, because the idea that either of us could bring this to our children is kind of the worst thought in the world, right? You don't want to be ever even the one that gives your loved ones a cold, let alone a virus that has dire effects. And we've developed this community with our neighbors that if any of us are going to a grocery store for basics like toilet paper, which is discussed a lot at the beginning of this,
I know,
and
strangely.
So essentially we'd send each other a message saying, hey, I'm going here. Can I get you something? And essentially our next door neighbor, she would make burgers and she would flip a couple over, wrapped up, but put them over the ledge and be like, anyone want a hamburger over there? And really the sense of, we're all in different places at 8:00 every night. We all go outside. We all ring bells. We dance to one song, and it's a check-in. So we have elderly neighbors and we see them, and it's like roll call, okay, Al's doing okay, Barbara's doing okay, and the kids are out there with whatever device with wheels they're in the mood for that day. So there's this sense of life looks different for all of us, but we're in this together, and we're all going to have different days and different moods. And to remember, it's okay to feel all the feels that come with this really nebulous time that we have, but to realize we're not alone.
Yeah. I love that. I'm sorry. Sometimes at the end, I hear these bright side moments and these stories, and I'm like, okay, now just give me a moment. Let me dry my eyes. No, but that's beautiful, and that's really the idea that we can all support each other, and we don't need outside forces to really prop us up. We have each other, and then we have this idea that we can use food to be our health. Kind of our health pathway or our lifeline, as far as what we can do to support ourselves. And we do have that power. And it's really, I read somewhere the other day, it was very simple. Food is power. And that idea that we have community and we have the ability to grow or source our own local food, and really right there, that gives us resilience. And that's just such an exciting idea, especially when we look forward and say, okay, maybe this isn't the last time something like this happens in our lifetime, but now we have some tools, and we have some resilience, we have some understanding that we can do this together. We have each other, and that's really exciting. So if there was anything that you would want to see that did not go away, is that it? Moving forward as we start to return to some kind of normal, we talk about this idea that we should be moving into better than normal, not just normal, not just what we came from, but what does that new kind of more improved normal look like to you in our society?
So I think the biggest thing, and I do hope that the new normal, that this has taught us, I don't like the word lesson, it sounds so negative, but this, but because of that static being gone and have to spend some more time with ourselves, and that can be uncomfortable, to remember the kind of the lessons learned, like what did fill my bucket personally, and what filled our bucket as a society, and to realize that we don't need to go back to all that static in our life, and to realize again that if one learned, oh wow, fruits and vegetables and whole grains and beans, they help my immune system, to not forget that later. And what's really cool is a lot of those foods that I just mentioned are really inexpensive. So to remember again that healthy can be delicious and it can be not expensive. So we have that empowerment to remember those simple pieces that really can carry us into normalcy, as you mentioned.
I love that. I know. I don't know what to call it. Nothing feels normal anymore, but I think that's a good thing. I think we got all shaken up in a way that is going to really open our eyes to a lot of great possibilities. And I love that. And so if anyone who's listening wants to learn more about what you do and your work, what is the best way for them to follow you or learn more about your passion and vision?
Yeah, so essentially my most active on social media is Instagram. I'm also, it's on Facebook as well, and it's Sensation Salud is my handle. And I also have a website, sensationsalud.com. So those are the best ways. And I'm again, this is my new baby. So as you know, it's a growth, it's a work in progress. But right now I am working with different entities to do online activities. And my whole goal is, again, I'm not one that's going to put a recipe out and say, you have to do it this way. It's really about morsels of empowerment in the kitchen. And that's the goal, is to just give you a visual, like, hey, this can look really pretty and it can be really simple, because we eat with our eyes first. And that's why I say the word pretty with food. So it's just those morsels of empowerment. So yes, Instagram, Facebook, website.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And I was incredibly inspired, and now I'm ready to go make myself some breakfast, and I'm thinking about humans still.
Nice.
You got me started with that breakfast scramble, and I haven't stopped. But thank you so much. This was really incredibly empowering and inspirational. So I will be following along with everything you're doing in the future. And thank you for all of your support for Very Good Food as well.
Oh God, thank you, Jessica. And as we finish up here, I want to say, as we talk about this community, I remember early on in this pandemic when you guys had just started doing takeout, and I remember going up to the lot, and not the lot, the plot,
the plot, close enough.
and heading up there, and just I remember wearing the plot shirt, and we took that picture, and I realized it wasn't about the picture. It was truly that sense of, we're in this together. And I love taking that drive and taking that time to just feel again like life is not just my house, and it's not just my community, and to be able to have that virtual hug with you and just feeling like we're in this together. So that's still a memory I have in my head. And I just, as we finish up, I just want to say that felt really good.
Well,
and
it
was
really good for me too. And I think that's the one reason that I really wanted to keep the restaurants open, is to just have that energy and interface with people, because you don't realize how much you miss it until it's gone. So even if it's temporarily. So blessings, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'll go ahead and stop the recording now. Hold on just a sec.
Okay.